All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are in the world. I'm David Snitkoff of Ocrolus, and thank you for joining this Flinks Engage webinar. I'm currently waiting for my co-panelist, Adam, who's having some internet connectivity issues. But before then, I can start by introducing myself and talking about a little bit of what we're going to be reviewing today. So I'm David Snitkoff, and I lead the growth team at Ocrolus. Ocrolus is an AI-driven document automation platform that powers the digital lending ecosystem. What that means is that lenders of all kinds, from consumer to small business to mortgage and more, use Ocrolus technology to automate their workflows so that they can make higher quality decisions with trusted data and unparalleled efficiency. And what that ends up doing is creating greater credit opportunity for consumers and businesses all around the world, and overall lowering the cost of credit. And we're really happy to be partnering with Flinks. Flinks has recently done a product announcement about our partnership together, which we're bringing to a whole set of really interesting and great consumer and business lending partners. And now I see that Adam has joined, so I'll ask him to do a similar intro.
Perfect. So sorry, everyone. I just had a power outage right before I was trying to connect into this. Perfect timing. Great to see you all today. Thank you so much for making the time in your morning to chat with David and I. As David mentioned, we're really excited about this partnership and what it means for a lot of our mutual customers around how we can change the way that we help fill in the gaps around data connectivity and build a way better experience for our customers and by extension, all of their users as they're trying to access various different financial products.
Great. And, so as we get started, I think an interesting thing to discuss is just the use of bank data in consumer lending, period. And, a lot of people have over the years used the term alternative data, alternative underwriting, things like that. And I often don't like that term because people confuse it with things like using your social media data or other really fringe things that don't have a lot of applicability in lending. Whereas I think of bank data as very fundamental to someone's financial health and something that lenders would really hope to understand. And so we can both talk about this. Maybe Adam, you get us started on just who is using bank data in a consumer lending process and why are they using it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at its core, like bank data is information about you, right? It's where you spend money, it's how you make money. It's actually like one of the best like primary sources of financial fitness of a consumer or a business. Even as we look at things like credit scores or other things as markers for financial health, all of those are generally derivatives and they're signals that show you how you might have used that data. So we look to a lot of our customers that are using bank data in a ton of different ways. The most common, and it's been in market now for years and years, it's hardly new and novel, is how do you use this for underwriting? The technology for how you receive that data and process it and transform it has evolved and changed over time. But looking at financial statements, looking at things like income, looking at things like ability to pay, willingness to pay, is definitely something that's been in market for a really long time. So I think the core data of looking at financial data is nothing new, doesn't surprise anyone. The big challenge that we've seen, and we work on solving a really small, narrow slice of that, is how do you make it easier to get that financial data from a customer, from a business, from wherever, and as well, how do you make sense of that once you had that? And we've kind of spent the last 6-7 years focusing on how do we build a really great digital experience to connect directly to bank accounts and try and pull that in. In many cases, there's a lot of great value in that, but as we'll talk about kind of throughout the webinar, there's actually a lot of downsides, and there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't succeed, or with certain customers where it's just not possible. And that's really why we wanted to think about how do we expand our view and look at different ways to access this same set of data that's tremendously interesting.
Yeah, and an interesting thing about bank data is it is customer provided or customer permission data. There is no bank data bureau. So
Mhm.
unlike with traditional credit data, you can't go to a very small number of organizations and say, hey, give me this person's bank data. That's not possible. The customer actually has to be involved in the experience of providing that data to you or authorizing you to go get that data on their behalf, which creates a lot of interesting workflow challenges as well as opportunities. But as Adam said, there's a lot of sources of data that you as a lender or other financial services organization need to understand the financial health of a borrower. And bank data is just such a source of truth, because if you can see at a transactional level the inflows and the outflows and the types of inflows and outflows, you can get a sense of the reliability of that borrower and their ability to pay, and really their capacity to take on new debt. So I think that, and Adam, as you mentioned, there's upsides and downsides to some of this, and some of the customer permissioning. And so one interesting thing that I am often struck by as I speak to people in fintech and banking is they often assume it's easier than it is, and that we kind
Mhm.
of are already many steps in the future to just very quickly being able to get bank data for consumers, and actually having it be pretty easy for consumers to provide. But what are some of the hiccups and challenges that exist in that process?
Yeah, we've seen quite a few, and like you said, I think a lot of people before they get into this often think it's going to be easier than it is, and those that have been in the field for a while and they've been operating with aggregators or they've been operating with ways of trying to automate this, they realize that this is super tough. And what we found is there's no silver bullet. There's no one single way where this way will consistently get data 100% of the time, 100% online, no matter what. The answer that most quite sophisticated financial organizations look at, especially at scale, is how do you piece together all these different things? So we see cases where customers are often getting direct data from the customer. They're sometimes often getting indirect data from the customer from brokers or some other indirect channel where somebody else owns that relationship with the customer.
Mhm.
That makes it really difficult to standardize when you have just different channels where you might be receiving customers. Uh, the same thing, you try your best to try and have as automatic ways as possible, if that's scanning of bank statements, if that's connecting to financial accounts, but those each have individual challenges. And then we still have a ton of manual processes where clients or customers are not comfortable, not able, not willing to go through some of these processes, and they'd rather kind of go through good old email to send
Mhm.
information back and forth. So that's really kind of the biggest challenge that we've seen is either customers expecting that one method will solve everything for them, or a lot of customers having to deal with the pain and the frustration of having multiple methods. And I think we actually have a poll
Yeah.
just to kind of get a sense of who's in the audience and kind of how are they thinking about financial data today. So maybe we'll get the team a second to bring that up. So we'd love to kind of hear from the people in the audience. How are you currently getting financial data from your customers? So are you manually asking for it, like asking them to send it or emailing it? Are you using a data aggregator like us or others? Are you uploading and scanning PDF documents with a solution like here? Or are you using a hybrid, or just not something for you? So we'll give it a couple more seconds to let it bake. We've got about 50% voted. We'll give it a few more moments here, and then we can kind of get a sense of uh, who's on the call and speak through that.
Yeah. And while we do that, Adam, you mentioned that a lot of consumers are reticent to provide their credentials, or maybe they don't know their banking credentials or have a two-factor
Mhm.
auth problem. How frequently does that happen?
Unbelievably frequently. So this is our core business of how do we build ways to connect directly to financial institutions. Um, we have more OAuth connections than any other aggregator right now in the Canadian or the US market. But the reality is there's a few things that are making this really tough. One of them is there's no formal open banking program in Canada or the US yet. we're seeing a lot of progress in both markets as banks start to make official OAuth connections available, which makes it easier and safer for customers to share their data. But there's still a big challenge of a lot of those not being available, a lot of them not having full data scope availability. So some of them might work great for retail banking, but not great for business banking. So that's one, is you just, like, the best ways to connect data digitally are not like fully available. Second is a lot of customers still don't fully understand this. They don't trust it. It doesn't matter how secure it is. It's new and it's just not comfortable for them. The third is you have customers who just try and they fail. They don't remember their credentials. They might not have access to those credentials, especially if you're talking about a small business where there's all kinds of different entitlements. So you have issues of failures there. And then you still also have failures of bank data connectivity for the majority of credential exchange based connections, which make up a very large chunk in the States and the vast majority in Canada, where you still have downtime, MFA issues, blockages from some of the banks. So there's a whole host of issues that make this incredibly difficult, despite it in many cases still being kind of the best option available. It's definitely not a silver bullet.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing, especially when you think about those of us who are very digitally native and you know, we know our passwords, we have a password manager, we're used to providing things digitally. It's often a surprise how difficult it can end up being.
Perfect. So David, does anything surprise you in these numbers that you see here?
Yep. Oh, let's put those numbers back up. Great. Okay, so I guess no, that, you know, this doesn't surprise me too much in the sense that if you know, people, almost everyone is getting financial data in some way, no surprise there. You know, hybrid is the most common, and that really is what this discussion is all about, what our partnership is all about. So that's great to see. I think, you know, manual is still a very, very large part of it. You know, this is probably a fairly digitally advanced group of people on the webinar, but I'd say in financial services overall, there's a lot of providers who are just at their beginning of their digitization journey and their automation journey, and so there's plenty of people working with documents manually. But hybrid, it makes a ton of sense. You go to where the customer is, and you know, if the customer wants to use an aggregator, that's great. If they want to upload documents, that's great, but you want to make it as easy for them as possible.
Yeah, and where have you seen a lot of the, so I chatted about some of the challenges with kind of financial data connectivity through an aggregator. Like, what are kind of some of the similar challenges that you've seen on your side of the house with uploading and scanning financial documents?
Yeah, so documents are a persistent but necessary evil in financial services. And so if you think of loans of all types, mortgage loans, personal loans, auto loans, business loans, they all involve some sort of documentation, bank statements, pay stubs, tax forms, etc. And traditionally, lenders would solve this in a few different, I'd say, suboptimal ways, right? So they'd either have a room full of people looking at the documents and keying them into a system, which would be a very expensive, error-prone, not scalable, or they would use what I'd call off-the-shelf undifferentiated OCR that does an okay job reading characters off the page if the document is of perfect quality, but really, really fails at the long tail. Or they'd outsource to some kind of BPO where it would no longer be in their hands and they would have a very, you know, inconsistent sort of operation. And Ocrolus really solves that problem. We take in over 300 document types from lenders and we digitize these documents so that, you know, you can basically get perfect standardized data every time. It's a very, very difficult problem because if you think about, even in the United States, there's over 5,000 banks, there's over 5,000 credit unions. In the last 18 months, I think we processed statements, bank statements from 6,500 different institutions. There's a very, very long tail. They all have different formats. People upload documents of really, really varying quality, and lenders need to have a high quality output to make the right decision. And so you're always balancing accuracy, speed, cost, standardization, and all these things. We've generally chosen to have accuracy as a North Star. We never, never, never want to sacrifice accuracy. And that we're always trying to optimize all the rest. But certainly getting all the documents from different places, but making the output super, super standardized for a lender is a really important need.
Right. And like one of the things that I found really interesting there is like how many customers are using a hybrid approach.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're seeing in our business today. And this is again part of why we were so excited about launching the partnership together. Because as much as we try our best to try and win in the category of financial data connectivity, we always need to find another way forward. And I understand kind of you guys see the opposite side of that coin of there's a ton of great use cases for scanning and uploading and enriching financial data as you do it, but there's still a need to try and do it digitally. Um, would love to understand kind of your view of customers who are going to both and kind of what do they get out of combining two solutions together as opposed to trying to kind of get as much as you can out of any one individual one.
You know, I think we are in a golden age of customer experience, and maybe this wasn't true 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, consumers and businesses might not expect the same degree of digital, automated, seamless customer experience they do today. But now, you know, every service they use, every app they use is more and more slick and customer centric. They don't want to go through a financial services workflow that's really messy, really manual, requires them to do a lot of steps. And so if you say, well, you can only give us your data in this format or else you'll fail, then I think as a lender, you are really opening yourself up to competition from a, you know, a more digital, more automated, more customer centric competitor. And so what we see a lot of people doing is saying, hey, customer, we're going to use your bank data because using bank data in an underwriting process helps us make a more accurate decision, and you know we can extend more credit, we can have better pricing, we can, you know, lend to people that we wouldn't have been able to lend to before because we didn't have a full picture of their finances. And we actually don't really care how you provide the data. If you can connect with Flinks, that's fantastic because you credential in and you get all the digital information right away. If you don't have that or you don't want to do that, upload a bank statement and we'll get all the same information. And then for the lender, it's completely standardized, whether it came, you know, through Flinks or through Ocrolus, you know, through Flinks upload. And I think that's a very, very powerful thing because, you know, you want as a lender to really, you know, attract customers through good customer experience. Back when I worked at American Express, I used to say our brand and our customer experience was one of our greatest risk management assets because customers wanted to do business with and maintain a good relationship with and pay back a company that respected them and treated them well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen some other sides to the same coin here too. Um, lending makes up a very meaningful part of our business, but I was speaking the other day with a really interesting payment company, a very large merchant acquirer. We work with them on some financial data connectivity pieces, but exactly what you just said, they wanted to give choice to their field sales force to be able to onboard and integrate merchants as fast as possible, give choice to them to be able to uh, verify that their business, verify that they own their business, and pushing them down one path or another path is not ideal. We want to give optionality. We want to make sure that you can get that whole long tail. So
Mm-hmm.
this was a really powerful offering for them to think about for their team of how can they not just say, okay, connect your bank account in order to go through, but also connect it, upload a void check, upload a bank statement here, and you put the power back in their front-facing teams and the client to be able to go through the experience as best they can, and ultimately still be able to have a standardized view to look at the data.
Yeah. What type of, or what examples have you seen of really the best workflow that someone's constructed for this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've seen so many different versions of this, and uh, despite businesses looking really similar, what we find is everybody does this in a totally different way. We have customers that like religiously do bank data connectivity to the point where they've eliminated all other options. They believe this is
Yeah.
the best way to go, no matter what. They've eliminated fallbacks in some cases, and the fallback is go back through the kind of main experience. Some of those customers are very successful. They run a great business. It's very lean, very fast, very digital. Uh, we have customers on the other side that use financial data connectivity as their fallback of a fallback. They've got
Mhm.
data that comes in through a broker channel. They've got data that comes in through their own Salesforce. They've got some customers that are super digitally native that go there. So the customers that I think have succeeded the most are the ones that have embraced what you just said, which is optionality and choice. And they think about, how do I equip my team, my product, my experience with as many experiences as possible to just open the floodgates to pull in financial data in however customers are willing to use it. And then they're able to then standardize it, enrich it, look at it in a single way. So that's kind of, I'd say, the big commonality mentally is like ones that aren't married to one technology or another technology, but are focused on kind of the task at hand, which is, how do I get financial data from near 100% of my users? And in order to do that, how do I give optionality to be able to do so?
Yeah.
Are there any specific customers or kind of specific deployments that come to mind to you when you think about people who are doing a great job at this?
Yeah, I think, it really, as you said, differs so much by use case, by loan type. I think there are sales focused lending processes where there's a broker or, an independent sales organization that's collecting applications and sending them to lenders. And very often that's a very document centric approach. And, even take the mortgage market where you have, a very large wholesale market, and a broker is collecting an application and there's 200 pages in a PDF, and they're going to send it to the bank, and then the bank is using Ocrolus or whatever process to be able to separate out the application into its constituent parts and make good decisions there. So that's something we see very often. We also see cases where, I'd say resident screening or tenant screening for rental applications is a good one, where it's very mobile and it's very photocentric. So, you're in the office of a leasing agent. The leasing agent says, hey, I need 3 months of pay stubs from you to show your income and employment. And, so someone will take a picture with their phone, and they'll, text it or email it. And so then you have the challenges of image quality in processing these documents. But of course, as a landlord or, property management company, you want to get a very good and accurate picture of someone's income. So there's really so many different use cases. In the mortgage side, we also have integrations into some of the loan origination systems that exist so that it's more seamless there. I think we'll see a bunch more interesting use cases in that market, especially when we get into things like, embedded software.
Perfect. We actually had a couple questions that have come in too. I've got a couple of them here for you, David, actually. So there's a few in here around processing the PDFs being done in real time and a delay. Can you talk about kind of your philosophy of how do you balance speed and accuracy?
Yeah.
And this is actually something that I found really interesting when I was learning about OCR versus what you do, which is not actually purely OCR. So I'd love to actually hear you talk a little bit about time and kind of how do you bring your hybrid approach to this?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And despite our name, we are not an OCR company, or not just an OCR company. We really want to handle the document analysis process from end to end, which is what we do. So when we get documents, and of course they could be PDFs, they could be images, we start processing them right away, and it's done initially by machine. So we've developed a lot of algorithms over time. Some are open source, some are off the shelf from from places like Google and Amazon. We've recently integrated technology from OpenAI using GPT embeddings in some of our models as well. And we've developed a lot of models in-house just because of the vast amount of training data that we have. But we try machines first to classify the document, to extract the data. But because of the variance in document type and document quality, you can't do everything with machines. There's always going to be some portion of things where you need human quality control, and we do place quality at the top of the stack in terms of our priorities. So we have Ocrolus data verification experts, and these people get tasks, and so they will see a task pop up in their system, and they'll say, hey, is this 8 really an 8 or is it a 6? And is this A really an A or is it a D? And they'll have to correct certain things that the machine doesn't feel super confident on. That makes sure that the data going back to our customer is fully accurate. But what it also does is it creates labeled training data so that we can continue to optimize our models over time to get more and more automated. And just as an example of the automation, several years ago, it took Ocrolus 45 minutes to process a bank statement. Today, more than half of our bank statements are processed instantly with no human intervention at all. And overall, our median turnaround time is about a minute and a half. So it's quite fast, and it's always getting more and more automated. So sometimes with, let's say, a longer, more complex document, lower document quality, it could take longer, it could take 8 minutes, 10 minutes, etc. But we're always automating as much as possible.
Yeah, and this was really something that was super important when we were looking for a partner here. We looked at a bunch of different ways to scan documents, and what we came to with the help of some of our customers was the most important thing is making sure that you can like get almost 100% of your customers through the flow.
Yep.
Given that we have all kinds of different ways of connecting, you can connect near instantly through Flinks, closer to instantly when we get more OAuth connections. We really wanted to make sure that when we put something in place for OCR, we're going to focus on getting that document correct and right. So speed is absolutely important. But where we've seen a lot of customers start to deploy this, especially in a hybrid solution that we have here today, is in all the situations where financial aggregation suffers, right? So where users drop out, where a user failed to connect, where a user couldn't find their bank and wasn't able to go through. So it's not an apples to apples comparison in terms of speed. We're always kind of pushing to see how we can make it faster, but we're actually comfortable with the document scanning taking a little bit longer because we want to make sure that we can get that done every single time. And that's kind of the balance that we work through with customers is how do we balance speed and success without compromising accuracy at any stage there. There's a kind of follow-up on that, David, I'll throw back to you around kind of how prepared are you for Canadian documents? We've seen this in our data, and like we would not select a vendor that was not excellent in Canada because it's our home area, but I'd love to hear your view on kind of how you think about different document types and different geographies outside the US.
Yeah, so we're very US centric, but we do work with some Canadian document types today. Certainly bank statements have a lot of similarities in Canada, pay stubs have a lot of similarities in Canada. There's clearly going to be differences on things like tax documents, as you might imagine. In general, the way we think about it is it doesn't take us a lot of effort to onboard a new document type. So even if we haven't done that particular document type before, because we have this human in the loop AI, we can use our workforce to generate a very large amount of high quality training data very quickly. And we can always accept something and work with something and process a high quality output even before it's completely automated. So we're very, very open to new document types and use cases, especially when we have partners who are able to work with us in building that. And very often, this has happened a lot in the mortgage market, where to do every single type of mortgage that exists, there's a huge long tail of documents. And we've had people come to us saying, hey, you support 90% of our documents today, but there's a couple others. But you know what? We want to help you get started because we want to be able to do it all through Ocrolus. So therefore, we are going to give you a bunch of the training data that we have in our database so you can get up to speed. And those partnerships have been very successful.
Yeah, and this is also something that we've seen in our experience, and again, why we wanted to pull the Ocrolus experience into Flinks, um, were we as well evolving the product to include more Canadian document types over time? Today, the bank statements we've seen in all of our testing to be fantastic, not just with big five, big six banks, but as well with the long tail of credit unions. Over the coming months, you'll see an evolution to include more Canadian document types like notices of assessments, T1s, T4s, blah, 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 the whole gambit there. So we really want to make sure that we can work with our customers to focus on what do you need, what are the types of data that you need, how do you want to put it all together, and then eventually, how do you want to put a layer of enrichment on top of that. Just trying to look at a couple of the other questions that have come in so far. We've got some great ones. So there was a question in here around, sorry, I'm just cruising through the notes here.
There's a better solutions for credential sharing when it comes to the digital option during banking data.
Yeah, so this is a great question. Over the next several years, we expect both Canada and the US to have a higher portion of connections go through OAuth connectivity as opposed to credential sharing. Canada is still undergoing a transition right now where we're under a regulatory consultations to govern that. Still a long way away from being potentially a law and being potentially launched. So the most realistic answer is that for the near future, at least the next year or two, you will see a hybrid where you will have a portion of connections that go through OAuth and a portion that will continue to go through credential sharing. We see that as well in the States where despite 50% plus of our traffic going through OAuth, a lot of connections are still required to go through credential sharing, especially on the business banking side, especially on mid-sized banks, credit unions. So there's a lot of security precautions that are in place in order to make that a strong experience, make sure that things are stored, encryption, data handling. There was another question in there around information security. Happy to make sure I can follow up afterwards with kind of more detailed information on how that's put in place there. It's not my personal area of expertise, but that is absolutely something that we can follow up with after the fact on kind of how do we make sure that this experience is strong and trustworthy and secure for all the parties involved. But that said, it still is a highly, highly used solution. In Canada, we saw millions of Canadians last year go through credential exchange in Canada just with Flinks. So it's highly engaged, highly adopted, but we're kind of constantly looking for ways to evolve that and make it stronger. And again, the one that we're recently most excited about is kind of how do we pull in different ways to pull the data.
Yeah, and I'll add some stuff about security on the Ocrolus side. We do a lot of work in security. We have multiple security certifications like SOC 2 Type 2. Our data verifiers that I mentioned are all Ocrolus employees. It's not something we outsource, and we do background checks, biometric access to our verification facilities. You're not allowed to bring a phone into an Ocrolus verification facility. They have to be put in a locker. So it's extremely, extremely secure from that standpoint. And we've, been happy that we've been able to pass the security vendor review process for a lot of pretty big financial institutions, which gave us a lot of confidence in the way that we're doing it. So, and we're always trying to innovate on the security side and just do more and more and more. And, I anticipate that every organization will have their own questions with security, but, we're generally always able to get through the process and answer their questions in a satisfactory way.
Perfect. So we've only got 1 minute left. There's a few questions we didn't get to. David and I will get back to all of you directly by email at some point today or tomorrow, just to make sure we can go through. Personally, I just want to say a big thank you for everyone for spending the time with us this morning. Maybe a kind of quick recap of like one main takeaway that if you had someone to walk away with, David, what would that be from this?
We are, as I said before, in a really golden age of customer experience. Your borrowers, your consumers, your businesses expect the ability to have a digital and automated process. They expect really great customer experience and service. And so with combining digital data aggregation as well as document support, you can help them get through this process as quickly and transparently as possible. And so we see that more and more. And we're very optimistic for how the sector will continue to implement that kind of solution.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Again, a big thank you to everyone there. And should you have any questions about kind of how we can enable this for you, how we can help you evolve to looking at a hybrid solution, and how we can help you build a better way to connect to the data of your users and analyze it no matter where it came from, our teams are really excited to speak to you soon. So thank you all. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.